Once again to the Only You podcast where we discuss mental health and mental wellness. It's me, Vince, here in the Solo 2 and Only You studios, and of course, Dr. Patino in his office, coming to you from Arizona. Really appreciate anybody listening live to type in your questions so we can answer them on air. And of course, we always like you to ask you to like, share, and subscribe. How you doing today, Doctor?
Well, another day, it's been a busy day as usual. Lots of patients, lots of problems, but lots of hope too. And that is what's about this business. We're actually in the business of selling hope. And I have to tell you, over the last 33 years, it gets a little more complicated to sell hope, in part because I think that what we're going to talk about today, which is an interesting phenomenon that I have observed for a while, and you and I have talked about, and is the whole issue of morality. There's been a significant switch, and I've been writing something about this. It's going to be published hopefully soon. But I wanted to give a little bit of an advance, of what we have seen different in terms of how people behave today, and how we have kind of lost our ways. We have kind of lost our sense of community and ethic moral contract among ourselves, in terms of I cover your back, you cover mine, right? And that seems to have changed quite a bit.
Is it possible? I know you and I have discussed this, and you've told me in my past, my pride and my morality can almost be a detriment, and that I value that much more than anything else. And if I see somebody act in a moral way, I don't want anything to do with them, and that can be very limiting for people's careers and relationships and the like. So, how does one reconcile your personal moral side versus what the morality that's being accepted or maybe being rejected within the greater levels of society?
Well, that's a pretty profound question, but I'm going to try to tackle it. That's what you do. You challenge me with profound stuff, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we explain it in a way that people can understand. Um, our morals and our ethics do have some flexibility, but the flexibility should never get to the point of challenging or attacking our potential survival, right?
Hmm.
One of the reasons we have developed what we call the superego, which is our morality, and we're talking in Freudian psychoanalytic terms now, which talks about ego, id, and superego. Which superego is basically morality, right? Is that little, person in our head that is telling us, you have to be careful, you should not do this, you shouldn't do that. And that has grown from our ability to work together, to be together as a society. We have developed morals and ethics. Now, when we talk about sweet cheese, we're talking about that superego being full of holes. And that's the concept, meaning that we have moved from flexibility to accommodate our need for change to no morals, right? To sacrificing the communal contract that we have with each other, that I'm going to do whatever I can to protect your survival, and you should do whatever you can to protect mine, right? The other reason we have morals is that we can behave as humans, and morality to some degree gives us the label, right, of being humans. It's not the fact that we are a different species of mammals, it's just the fact that we have different rules, meaning we have created moral rules so we don't we're not fighting with each other all the time for property, for companionship, for who's better and who's worse, right? Even though we kind of develop these initial holes in our morality that have to do with groups, right? So groups were created in terms of individual tribes that has something in common, whether it's genetics or culture, and then we develop different groups based on social boundaries. Then we started creating nations, right? So we started to separate each other, And that's when actually things started to evolve in terms of flexing our morality, right? For example, we shouldn't be killing ourselves, but it's okay to kill somebody of the other group, right? So you start with the wars and things like that. And those things have always been challenges to our morality, right? And we've always had them. So the sweet cheese was had a lot of less holes, if you may, right? So we also created rules when it was acceptable to not follow our morality. And every society, every group, every religion has gone to the challenges of morality. You know, I mean, you can we can talk about the Catholic Spanish Inquisition. You know, which it was okay to torture people because they didn't believe in God. That's a huge flexing of your moral values as based by the Ten Commandments, right? Okay, so we have been challenged in the past. The problem is that now, in the last 15 to 20 years, there's been a very rapid degradation of the moral values and a kind of a um, constriction, if you may, in terms of the groups becoming more intense, less, and more willing to challenge all moral values based on convenience. And that is really the ultimate challenge we have confronted. And the problem is that I think it can challenge our survival as humans, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, because once you get to the point where it's about solely about us, the smaller group, versus them, there's conflict. I think you mentioned as you know, in your writing, I did get a chance to read it. Thank you, by the way. Um, we developed, group dynamics for survival mechanism. Synergy and working as a group is always more beneficial than working as a sole person. In order to have the basis of that is that morality and that code of ethics. And then on top of that, layered on top of that are laws to support that, and the people decide to follow. It's a social contract. But what happens, as you just alluded to, when one group says, it's okay for us to do this, but it's not okay for you to, or vice versa?
Correct. And that actually exploited when we took those challenges into politics, right? And in which we created kind of like a confluence of lack of morality, everything goes, and only myself or I can decide what's moral, ethical, and legal, right? So if I decide that it's not, right, then it is okay for as long as I'm doing it, but it's not okay, as you said, if you're doing it. So over the last 5 or 6 years, I'm really amazed because I've been doing this for 33 years, how we end up so accepting of lying,
Mm,
right? I mean, lying has become the norm, not the exception, right? And lying goes with everything. And furthermore, it gets into the point in which lying becomes a way of defining the political landscape, right? And the perpetration of lying and misinformation has created danger, right? I mean, we can safely say that misinformation has become more of a problem than the virus.
mm. It's been weaponized for sure.
Well, weaponized in ways that go against our ability to maintain safety, right? And to the point that some groups, and maybe I'm a hopeless romantic, but I do believe that most people that follow leaders only believe some of what the leader says, right? But they're very ashamed of not following.
Mm,
And it becomes difficult for them to be ashamed or to feel ashamed that they don't belong to the group anymore. And that creates a very dangerous dynamic. I was actually watching the some of the video presentation of the January 6th um, hearings this morning, before I went to the hospital. And I was listening to what people were saying, and then I was thinking about the arguments on the other side. I mean, we were hearing what the commission was asking some police officers, right? And then you see the videos and you hear what some other people say, especially in social media, and you say, how can we have so distant of a reality understanding, right? Between what we're seeing in front of our eyes and what we're hearing people saying and what other people believe.
Mm,
So that idea of the cognitive dissonance of reality between groups, I think is very dangerous, right? Because it is us versus them and is not the survival of us.
mm.
So if something like this, like a big pandemic or January 6th threatening democracy, is that a wake up call? What would it take?
Aliens landing, something even bigger. But you're right. We shouldn't need to have something extraterrestrial or even existential to push us through that. And that's back to your idea of morals. Now, to that point, a lot of people would then respond to you saying, "Okay, I agree. Our morals and values are done. So the solution, of course, is religion."
Uh, let me rephrase that for you because that's a slippery slope, and I
It
don't
is.
really, and I don't really want to get too deep into it. And I'll get somewhat into it, but more than religion, right? I'm not a big fan of religion, but I'm a big fan of hope and faith, right? So I don't want to take this into the believing in God slippery slope. I want to keep it at the level that we have to have faith and we have to have hope, but we have to learn how to share it, right? How do we together can have faith and hope? Religion is problematic because religion's history is not the greatest example of morality,
Well,
right?
based on your previous example, torturing
Well,
people to death because of their lack of faith.
well, let me use a separate example. I don't think that there has been one thing in the history of humanity that has killed more people than religion. I mean, for God's sakes, I shouldn't say that.
More people have been killed in the name of God than any other cause.
Well, that's not. I mean, and we're not talking about a long time ago. Let's look at Iraq, Afghanistan, right? Why did that happen? Yeah, people said oil, and territory, blah 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 blah. At the basic level, those were religious wars. We're still having the Middle East being a hotbed of people dying for religious reasons,
Mhm.
right? So how do we end up there, right? And to what extent that gets to the borders of delusional reality, right? That people are blinded by false hopes, right? Because at the end of the day, and I think I read something about this. I think it came from you, not from your writings, but something that I got from you in terms of people saying, "I'm willing to die for my country, but I'm not willing to die for my neighbor."
Yeah. Willing
I
to take
mean,
a bullet, but not willing to take a needle. Right?
that's right. I mean, how does that happen? How do we end up in a situation of false patriotism? Because patriotism, if it exists, and I know I'm going to be criticized for saying this. If patriotism does exist, it starts at home and with your neighbor. It's not the country, because if we don't have yourself, your neighbor, your community, we don't have a country. And what is
Absolutely.
happening right now is that we're being challenged to explain what is country. I mean, we get into, yeah, it's patriotic, whatever. But how can you have patriotism if you don't have a country?
Yeah,
If you
and
don't
it,
have a society, if you don't have a group of people, that has the compromise and the contract to make things happen together. I thought that was a country, right? But that, I mean, lately in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't know who I'm talking to. I mean, being hated because I have an accent and because my last name is not, Anglo-Saxon, even though I have Anglo-Saxon background, you know, that's new to me. That's alien to me. Not that I have not confronted discrimination from being Hispanic. I mean, all of that traditional degree of fear because I'm different. I can understand that, but that is something I can deal with. Being hated for it, that's totally totally alien to me, right? And it helps me understand a little better how deeply rooted has become things that we've known for a long time, and only recently people, including politicians, have felt comfortable saying it's okay for me to be a racist. It's okay for me to hate you because you're Hispanic or an African American. It is okay for me to not want you in this country because you speak two languages and only one. And I'm not asking for any sympathy, right? I mean, I'm I can handle that myself. But how can we have a country when we don't have the cohesiveness to walk together? When you walk outside and somebody looks at you and looks at you like you shouldn't be here, you should be dead because or in a different country. That is not a way to build and maintain our society. And the question and challenge is how long can we do it?
mm, yeah, it really does that breaking down to totally tribal, even clannish protectiveness to say, we are the group and you're not. Evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins, who is a very famous at lecturing, and he's an atheist. By atheist, it's more against religion than necessarily directly as God. I mean, depending on how you listen to what he has to say. He's had arguments with people concerning the religion that they say religion is the answer to replace or to guide our moral values, and he disagrees. He says, I think two people with zero religion could sit next to each other and say, okay, killing people, is that good or bad? It's bad. Stealing, good or bad? It's bad. Lying, good or bad or bad. But it has to be applied universally and not in selected groups. And that's where that conflict seems to lie.
Yes, and I totally agree with that. You see and again, I think that faith in ourselves, faith in the future, is a human trait. I do think that we have to believe in something. My ancestors from Mexico believe in the sun and the moon and serpents and stuff like that. That's fine with me. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I mean, they could see the sun coming up, and see the moon coming up in the evening. So they have a little more reality base, right, on something they could see that has had an impact in the crops, and I mean, stuff like that. Now, is that okay? Well, they had faith in something, right? The problem we have is that religion is always comparing itself with other religions, right? So you have to pick one and you have to say this is the good one and that one is not good one.
Mm.
So even among us Christians, let's say, because I grew up as Catholic and I did all the things that are required of somebody being Catholic. And I'm probably being told that I'm not a good Catholic, but that's besides the point. The thing is that that is what you believe, and if you don't believe that, you are wrong. And when we start labeling people right or wrong based on what they believe, that's another slippery slope, right? Because that's how wars get started.
So really,
That's
it needs to be more about inclusion as opposed to what it is right now. It's exclusion.
Yeah, you see, because I deal with people who are severely impaired, in the hospital, for example, and kids, who are suicidal, homicidal, and psychotic. And the things that I hear in society, I hear in the hospital, kids that come from families that believe certain things, and they don't like my accent and they don't like the fact that I have certain beliefs and maintain neutrality in how I ask questions and all of that. And they can get aggressive verbally, question me, what do you know? You're nobody, blah, blah, blah. What I've learned though is that if I don't listen to them, I cannot understand them, right? And my job is not to be offended by what they say. My job is to provide them options so they can handle whatever problems they have in a more adaptive way. But it has to start with somebody listening. And the problem today is nobody's listening. It's like we all turn ADHD in the last 5 years, and nobody has enough attention span to listen to the other person. And in part is because listening is threatening, right? If I listen, I have to challenge my ideas. But I have to say, if you listen, then you can challenge the other person's ideas in a logical, non aggressive, not violent way. So I'm constantly extending the hand to people who are being aggressive toward me and asking, how do you want me to help? You know, I hear you say this and it sounds like you're very angry, but you don't even know me. So, how can you hate me if you don't know me? So, can we get to know each other? And the problem is that that statement is very threatening to people. And it's a process, it's not an event. More than half of the time, I do that with a kid. The kid tells me to go to hell, right? Right? But that is fine. I can take that. But if somebody is aggressive with me and I'm aggressive with them, it ends there.
It spirals
If,
out of control.
exactly. So somebody has to be willing to listen. And this slippery slope of questioning each other and not listening to each other, it's been going on for a while, And I don't care if you're from the right or from the extreme left or from the extreme right or in the middle. It doesn't matter, right? But when I hear that a right-sided or left-sided university is not going to allow a speaker to come into the university, right, because of their beliefs, that's wrong. I went to a university and I've been in more than one university. I teach in a couple of universities, and the word university has a meaning. It means universal. Is where we go so we can open our minds, not where we go to close our minds. And now we're sending people to universities to close their minds.
Mm.
And only one line of thinking is acceptable. How did that happen? That perpetuates the process of cultism, right? Because universities are no longer universities. Whether it's a religious university or non religious university, whether it's in the left or on the right, only their cult has value. And
So,
that's extremely dangerous.
So how do you bridge that gap? How do you get a one group who is at one extreme of the other to understand that the other group has first the the ability to exist, right? Has their own opinions. They're not particularly threatening, even if you don't like what they say, and to be cooperative and sit down and listen to one another. How do you bridge that gap when people at this point are so angry and so volatile, and as you said, are not willing and are so set in supporting and protecting their paradigm that they will not accept any new data. How do you make that first step?
The first step, and I'm going to speak as a psychiatrist because I do this individually, we also do it with groups, is that I have to acknowledge that the person who's angry in front of me is afraid. That is not aggression, that is not necessarily hate. I strongly believe that you can only hate people that you love. right? It's a very passionate feeling. You
Because the
may
opposite of
be
love is indifference, right?
exactly. So I believe that people who think they hate you, they fear you, and it's easier for them to say I hate you than to say I fear you, right? Because fear reflects weakness, hate reflects strength, right? So we have to take a step back, and we need to say, I understand that it's difficult for you to accept somebody like me, but if we don't communicate, right, then we'll stay in our camps and nothing changes. And we have to have a sense of purpose as a society, right? That we want to, one, we want to stay alive. Second, we want to move forward and continue evolving because we're an evolving species, right? And we need to continue to evolve or we're going to disappear. It doesn't matter whether you go to Mars or the moon or whatever other people want to go. We're here and we're here together. So we need to recognize the fear and not be threatening to other people, right? Even when somebody's being threatening to you, somebody needs to be rational. And you need to understand that most of the time when people threaten you is because they fear you
Mm.
or because they want you to change something. So we have some responsibility to listen and not react. Now, if you take that into practical issues, we have to extend the hand and we have to say, I'm willing, I have patience, I'm willing to listen, right? Because it's not about me, it's about you. And that's what I do with my patients all the time. It's never about me. As a clinician, I cannot put myself in between the, the patient and the patient needs. It's always about the patient needs. So I have to extend the hand and say, I know you're angry, I know you're frustrated, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, and I want to listen. If you're not ready to talk, we'll talk tomorrow, right? But if we start pushing each other away, that becomes problematic. I think that the second thing we need to do, besides extending a hand, is we need to stop canceling people because the cancel culture is another reflection of fear, right? And it comes from all directions. We need to stop telling people you are wrong, so you don't belong, right? And that's what we're doing nowadays. If I don't like what you say, I block you out. It's too easy. But the
And it
question that
and
go
it
ahead.
seems literally they feel like that that person needs to be literally obliterated, can't be around. And
Yes.
it's like their mere existence, because it contradicts these people, whomever's beliefs, is a threat to them. Instead of, okay, you're there, I'm here, we can still coexist.
But you see what happens is cancel culture is the ultimate manifestation of narcissistic rage, right? And we need to actually look at it from that perspective. Narcissistic rage is a very destructive force, but it usually comes from a very deep sense of insecurity,
Mm,
right? Because people take the comments as if they're being directed at them. So if I say something that somebody doesn't like and they want to cancel me and they're threatening me and they say you should disappear, that's too intense. That's making me too powerful, right? I have the power. I mean, you're telling me that I have the power to awaken your deepest sense of insecurity to the point that I have to disappear so you can feel safe?
mm.
That's narcissistic rage. And it's extremely destructive. And I think that people need to recognize it, right? And you don't have to feel sorry for them, but you have to maintain your neutrality. I mean, I think I sent you something this morning about boomers versus millennials, and you can see a lot of that, you know. I don't want to listen to anything that you boomers have to say because uh, you're wrong. Number one, you're wrong. Number two, you need to disappear. You're getting closer to dying. It's like, okay. But my experience has no value according to them because it's too threatening,
Mm.
right? But threatening how? I mean, when and I remember somebody, right-sided speaker was coming from Britain, and he was going to go to Berkeley, I think. And there was a big uproar, and actually, I think there were some riots or something, from students not wanting that person there. And what the university did, canceled him.
Mm.
Why is that so threatening, right? And I think that we need to start reversing this cancel stupidity and narcissistic rage, because it will destroy us. I mean, everybody will become a little island on themselves, right? And then gets translated into, I don't want a vaccine. I don't care about you. You get COVID, you know? I'll never get it. I mean, all the irrational stuff that you're hearing in the news right now, that is being perpetuated and weaponized by greed, basically. Greed politically, greed economically, and so on. At some point, we need to go back to rationality. Now, let me tell you why I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I believe that most people in this country are rational, and some of them are afraid, and they don't know how to get out of that bubble of fear, right? So we need to figure out, how do I help you be less afraid? You know, how can we get into the middle and think of ourselves, even if we want to think selfishly as a country? I don't have a problem with that, you know, that we can agree on what's best for all of us. I mean, let's stop defining for each other what's best for you. Because what I hear is, what's best for you is to get rid of me and send me to another country, right? It's not going to happen. I'm a U.S. citizen since I was born, even though I was born in another country, right? So this is my country, but for some people, they will tell me that it's not, because I have an accent and I speak differently, and maybe I look differently. So I think that hope and faith in ourselves can take us a long way, but we need to stop being afraid, though.
So banishing fear, accepting the other a little bit, being open to new data, being open to personal growth, and dealing with fear is probably the most important thing we can do right now as a society. Uh,
Yeah, but we have both. Everybody needs to talk less and listen more. I
so
mean,
take
it's funny saying this in a podcast, right?
so take those conversations that maybe you're afraid to have because they're challenging, and truly challenge yourself to say, okay, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to listen empathically. I'm going to listen without judgment. I'm going to listen without responding, and take some time to really analyze what's being said to you
You
instead of
know,
just purely reacting to it.
let me end with this. If I had to do a slogan for vaccination, I would say, "How can I help you be less afraid?" Just like that. Just put it out there. How can I help you be less afraid? Talk to your doctor, right?
Seems like good advice. Once again, doctor, really do appreciate your time and your wisdom. Thank you out there for listening. Please, again, like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you again.
Thank you, Vince. We'll see you next week.
Take care.